guess. Your home?
It was. And it was beautiful. Titan was like most planets. Too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution. But random, dispassionate, fair to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. I've been getting a lot of requests to do a video for the Eternals franchise that Marvel just announced. They're going to be doing what sounds like a new trilogy of Eternals movies. They teed that idea up during Infinity War with this Thanos scene where he talks about the history of his people. So I'll explain their comic book history and how Marvel will probably tweak their backstory a little bit and how they can use this as either a period film or something in present day. Because as the name implies, the Eternals have immortality, so there are ways that they can introduce them in the MCU without completely breaking their timeline. Because if they've been alive this whole time, then where have they been while this has all been going on? So if you're finding me for the first time, be sure to subscribe to get all the Marvel videos. There's a new round of that Black Panther Blu-ray giveaway too. All you have to do to enter that is just be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. But the big deal with the Eternals in Infinity War is that as far as we know, the Eternals that were living on Titan are extinct. But that doesn't mean that they're all extinct everywhere, because there are still Eternals living on Earth, or that lived on Earth in the comics. So quick comic book backstory. The Eternals were created by the Celestials long before the Inhumans ever came around. The most recent example of a Celestial in the MCU is Ego the Living Planet. Now, he's not a Celestial in the comics, but MCU changing a couple minor things. Celestials are just godlike beings that have existed since the beginning of time that have power on a scale that you've never seen before, Galactus-level power. So in the comics, there's actually a cosmic entity called Eternity that is sort of the consciousness of the collective multiverse. But in service of sort of gardening itself, it created the Celestials to go out, garden, grow things, run experiments, tinker with life within the multiverse at will, and just see how things went. So the Celestials would come to a planet, they would populate it, then they would come back eons later to see what it had grown into, and either cull it if it didn't work out, or allow it to continue to flourish. So that's why they call Galactus the Hungerer. He's a servant of the universe. He's sort of the gardener that goes around and pulls the weeds out so that other things can grow. That's the real reason why he consumes planets. Not because he likes to kill people, but because he needs to weed the universe so that it can continue to grow. So a little bit of Thanos' line of thinking, like you erase half of all life so that the other half can flourish. But there's eons of history between what we're seeing happen during Infinity War and the original creation of the Eternals. So because they tee up the idea of them being largely extinct as of the events of Infinity War, that's why I think they might jump around in the timeline through the Eternals series. Because they live so long, there's ways that you can include stuff that's happening in present day with some of the current characters like Captain Marvel. But there's just so much rich history that it would be weird if they didn't have at least one of these new Eternals movies set during the distant past. When they're first created, the Eternals just live really long, like Loki and Thor. Thor is 1,500 years old. He's still considered a pretty young man as of Infinity War right now. The Eternals can live even longer than that. Icarus is a relatively big character. You've seen him on a lot of comic book covers. He's about 20,000 years old, just to give you an example. But the Celestials created them for the express purpose of protecting the Earth, their celestial experiment against the deviants and offshoot rays. So because Marvel and a lot of the reporters that are talking about this are using Game of Thrones analogies, think of it as the forces of man, the realm, versus the White Walkers and the Night King. The reason why Thanos looks like he does, and not like another human like the other Eternals living on Titan, is because of a genetic abnormality that expressed making him look like the deviants. Eventually what happens is a very Thor Ragnarok situation where half of the Eternals want to go out and conquer the galaxy because they're so powerful, the other half just want to be peaceful. So it's like during Ragnarok where you have Odin, who's this very warlike person, goes around conquering, stops at 9 realms as Hela says, and then chooses more peaceful ways, then banishes Hela. So that's essentially what happened to the Eternals. Half of them got banished because they lost the Civil War. The ones that were banished went to Titan. But then later Kronos, the leader of the Eternals that were still living on Earth, experimented with cosmic energy, big backfire happened, and they all gained superpowers, including their immortality. So Kronos lost his body, but one of his sons, Allards, Thanos' father, went to go find the Eternals that had been banished after the Civil War, found that they'd all died in subsequent wars that they themselves had caused because of their warlike ways, save for one woman who became Thanos' mother. So the two of them started to repopulate Titan, and then it eventually turned into what you're seeing today. The difference in the comics is that it wasn't overpopulation that killed the planet, it was actually Thanos himself that came back and killed all of his people. But you have to remember that while this is all going on, not all of the Eternals left Earth. They had these crazy cosmic abilities. Some of them just hid out, some of them made pacts with the other gods of the Earth. But largely in the pantheon of Marvel comic books, they're not super popular characters. So that's why you don't see them running around in present day with the Avengers and a bunch of this other stuff that's been happening more recently. So there's just sort of this weird offshoot Jack Kirby race of people like the Inhumans, also very weird, subsequent experiment from another alien race that was spun out of experiments that were done on Eternals. So the Inhumans sort of flow from the Eternals too, but they're not the same thing. So that's why I think what they might try to do is do some of these movies set in the past, and then because some of them are so powerful and long-lived, you just have one or two Eternals pop up in present day and just say that they've been hiding out this whole time, avoiding any conflicts with the Avengers and Thanos. But the really big deal about them bringing this into the MCU in a big way is that it allows them to do more Celestials. So a lot of you have been asking, where are the other Celestials? We have Esau the Searcher in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. We know Eagle the Living Planet is one of them now. There are many others that are potentially out there. Nowhere is actually the head of a dead Celestial. So like when they're flying into that actually used to be a living being. But I think part of the idea is that in present day, a lot of those beings have either died off because of big conflicts or they've gone dormant. The Deviants themselves worship one of the Celestials that they call the Dreaming Celestial. So it sounds like they will invoke a lot of that big Marvel, old school Jack Kirby mythology when they do these movies, regardless of what time period they're set during. It's just they've kind of done the job of introducing the idea, like Ego the Living Planet doesn't know what his origin is, he just knows that he was a floating brain in space that came into consciousness, like, I just came into being, that's all I know. So I wouldn't be surprised if not all the Celestials look exactly like the Jack Kirby Celestials, but there's no way they're going to do it without doing some Jack Kirby. Just look at Ragnarok, all these Kirby designs in the background, they're just screaming to do more stuff like this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So good news, bad news situation. If you're a big fan of the Inhumans, I feel like them ramping up for a giant Eternals saga means that they're probably not going to do the Inhumans anytime soon. But that doesn't mean that they'll never do characters like Black Bolt. I mean, you never know. Anything could change in the future. I think that Kevin Feige is just sort of cherry-picking really new ideas that they haven't tried before, and big-time old-school Celestials is something that they haven't dealt with before. Like, what is the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? We've really only visited a very narrow time frame so far. But in present day, there aren't that many characters that are powerful enough to actually legit be a threat to the Eternals or the Celestials. Captain Marvel is the first introduction to that in the characters that wield Infinity Stones like Scarlet Witch. Thor has had a lot of comic book crossovers with the Celestials, but you get the idea. There aren't that many single characters by themselves that could actually face one and survive to tell the tale. So just in general, I'm expecting a very Game of Thrones-y style period piece with some connections to what's happening in present day, with the idea that in the future we might see Eternals interacting with the current characters right now. But they haven't announced when this first Eternals movie is going to come out. My first guess is that it's going to be sometime after Guardians 3. Like right now, that's the big space-based franchise. There'll probably be a small break, and then they'll do other space-based movies. Eternals sounds like it's meant to be the first big one in a new franchise. So they just hired the writer. They don't usually hire a writer if they don't plan on releasing something relatively soon, so I'm guessing this drops the year after Guardians 3 comes out, which would be 2021. But congratulations to the giveaway winner from my last big Infinity War video, Tommy Hawk. Please private message me so I can get your contact details. I'll name a new winner when I post new Marvel. There'll be more Deadpool 2 posting tomorrow, so be sure to go see the movie. While you wait for everything, click here for my non-spoilery Deadpool 2 review, and click here for that Soul Stone scene. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.